everyone, welcome back to Old World Legends, where we focus on growing the community. I'm your host, Mike, and with me as always is Evan.
Oh my god, am I just obsessed right now with painting my beautiful high elves. I think anyone on the Discord's been seeing all my insanity. I've been gluing rocks and sand and basing to my freaking movement trays. Yes, I'm doing that. That's
Yeah,
I think
they're
most people
looking
think I'm
good.
crazy, but
They're awesome. But today we're not talking about high elves, even though I know Evan will find a way to talk about high elves again. Today we're going to be talking about a fun topic in terms of tournament comp or composition for events and what we've learned over the last couple years running old world events. I've run an event every single month for over 2 years now, with the exception of December. And it's been really interesting, and it's been a journey with the community and such. And I think one of the things that the tricky parts for TO is, your community, especially when you get started, right? It's small when you get started. Like when we started the first events, like I had, I think, 8 people show up to the first RTT, right? But now we're rocking over 30 person, 30, 35 plus person 2-day events, which is amazing. But it's been a journey to get here, and people come and go. And so one of the challenges with the TO is if you tend to go too hard with changing too many things, it will make some people happy and it will make other people unhappy. And that's always a tricky balance, is what's the right amount and what's the right amount for your community? Because you're like, well, if you make half the people unhappy, that's a big problem when half the people don't show up to the events. And the other challenge is everybody's there at the events for different reasons. Some people are there to compete for best general, and that's totally cool. Some people are there just to hang out with their friends, and that's the only reason. And I love those people, right? Some people are there to go for painting. Some people are there to just try out a new list or just put their models on the table. Believe it or not, most of the people who show up to events are not competitive in the slightest. I mean, they'll take a list that they think is good. That's about where their competitive edge ends. And they're just there to hang out with their friends, really. And the other thing we've also observed is a lot of players in the community, some play in the league,
yeah.
some play casual games, but there's a good number of players who primarily just go to the monthly event. So it is a broad spectrum when people are showing up, and that's always the challenge we run into. And one of the things I know Evan talked about in a sec is it could get really stale if you just have one style of tournament format that you're offering, one event format and one rule set and one comp set. And we very much do not do that. We actually are constantly evolving and changing and offering different things.
Right. And part of that is iterative. So, for example, we went almost I think over a year without doing any kind of objective events. So, like the first 2024, we didn't really do any of those, like victory points for holding a particular point. But I think by the early 2025 era, I was really obsessed with we need objectives on the table. You have to control something with units, and you can't just run away all the time. And 2 months later, the Match Play Guide comes out, or maybe 3 months later. So we had a few events under our belts trying out my Gleaming Pennant rule system. So I did actually write a whole 24-page PDF that 8 people read.
I read it. There's some good stuff in there.
It is, yeah. And then the Match Play Guide comes out, and it misses some of the edge cases that I had considered and thought of, and it did lead to various different metas over the past year. But we played that mostly out of the box for about a year. And it's been a year now, pretty much, and we've been playing it and seeing some of the flaws. And I think that, especially without new releases, new Arcane Journals coming out, the meta starts to just get really solved after about 3 to 6 months of not a lot of things have changed. And once the meta is solved, I think that whether you're a competitive player or not, it does kind of get a little bit stale. And I do think that there are ways that you can improve the quality of the game simply by just saying, here's how scoring your victory points from an objective works. Now you have to try to play a little bit with your opponent. You can't just run away all the time, etc. It's always been a problem. The more uninteractive I am with you, the more I win. So if I don't let you touch me because I'm ethereal, or I am really fast, or all of my stuff flies, or everything is skirmish, great. Then you don't get to do any damage. I don't suffer any losses, and I win. So uninteractivity is always very powerful, but it's also less fun. And so there's a big balancing act there when people are going to naturally tend to look for a way to be uninteractive without that having to have, to the point where it's not a game anymore, right? It's not fun.
And there's nothing wrong with that. That's actually just, honestly, that's just very clever players working on the latest puzzle. Because again, the meta is always changing. It really is. It's always changing. We've talked about that on the channel multiple times. New strategies form, a new book comes out that shifts things, new magic items become a refresh, a match play guide drops. Like it's always
Cathay
changing. And then
comes
your
out.
local scene changes, right? Right. Or Cathay, Sky Lanterns are a thing. Or right, your local, all of a sudden people start playing one army more than another just because they had fun with an army, but they're trying out new things in your local scene. So things are always shifting and changing all the time. And so what players, but ultimately, to Evan's point, what has been true in almost every version of the game is that effectively there are still the core rules fundamentally have scoring as a core fundamental of the game, and scoring is based upon killing your opponent's army. But on top of that, just from even if there was no scoring system, if I could do something where my army stays alive and your army is dying, then effectively I am winning the battle, right? So inherently part of the strategy period is a situation where what's the maximum damage I could do to my opponent's army and taking the least amount of punches back in the
Right.
face on my army. But of course, that's a slippery slope, and now we're playing 40K, which, right, we don't want to. It's not a gun. It's not supposed to be a gun game. It's supposed to be a rank and file game. That's always the challenge. Part of one of the challenges with the designers of this game, finding the right balance between those two, where you still want cannons, you still want magic, you still want fireballs and archers and things, but melee still needs to be the dominant component of the game, and that's difficult. And we found um, after the fade before the match play guide, people did shift from they did shift before that into their gun line, disengaging wood elf lists where they, everything. And then the match play guide came out, and then that shifted people towards, oh, you need to go to these objectives. And then we iterated on those a bit, making them, because they weren't worth enough points to get people to put units in harm's way. Then we upped the points. Now they are. And we've actually found for a lot of our missions or scenarios now, we've actually tried, even at the narrative event, we tried something else there where there was actually no kill points whatsoever in your score whatsoever, right?
Yeah.
In fact, we actually simplified it too. It was just we had a major objective for the mission, and then we had a side objective, and then it was like, did you get there was something that was it, and it was just different tiers of that. So that was fun.
And what that tended to lead to is people were like, oh, I don't need to try to keep my guys alive. Let's just have him do the charge and see what happens. And I think that freeing action is great in that totally uncompetitive situation where you're just having some good fun. You still have an objective that you're trying to do. You can see what your score is going to be. You have a team,
but there was no downside for the objective. Because the only way to win was to do the objective, you would throw troops away, which ultimately led towards more engagement, which led to a lot of fun.
So the thing that might be dancing around is the points now. But I think that what this video is mostly about, because the last video was about the state of the meta, how things are with the match play guide, is what are we doing for our next events? We have a teams event coming up. We already ran 2 RTTs this year without doing that big of a change, and we have decided to change which units can control objectives. And I have made some slight tweaks to some of those missions you're familiar with, that I think we're going to create more engagement and have a better balance between some of those kind of gun line avoidance armies versus the people who want to bring rank and flank. So
just to be clear, this is not the OWL comp. This is what we're doing for this event. Yeah. Right? We are always evolving. We're always shifting. And again, we run narrative events. This is our first team championship event, a 5-person team event. We run double events, right? We are talking about other Highlander or Siege events coming up in the future. So we run a lot of variety to keep it fresh and exciting. So even though you see this is what we're trying out for this event, and we are trying things, and we typically test them at RTTs, get some feedback from the players, then this is good enough, or we refine and then take it to a 2-day event. So this is one of the ideas we're trying. We might not do this at all at the next event, but we'd like to take you through it and share with you some of our current thoughts to not force, but motivate the community to take, maybe, again, we want to tweak the puzzle for them, right? Tweak the meta. Like, okay, here's a slight variant. How would you maybe tweak your list to make it a little more engaging, even at the list building phase? And that's what we're trying to accomplish.
Okay, so let's just, for everyone who's listening, because we did pull up this, but we have things that are kind of different in blue here from your match play guide standard situation. So the first thing that's different is, and you kind of have to look at this all at once, but first thing that's different, and we did try this at a few events and it worked great, was if you can contest an objective if you either have unit strength 10 plus, or if you have 5 plus and you still have your full commands, you still have a champion, a standard, and a musician left. This is pretty important because I saw just an absolute tremendous shift towards I'm going to bring 13 model units because I want to be able to like lose one or two guys to some arrows and still be at least 10 plus. And that unit strength 10 plus is a real big hurdle for expensive elite armies to try to hit with any kind of scoring consistency. And the cheap chaff, horde armies can just throw around tons of those units and have them be above unit strength 10 all the time. And so that kind of created this pretty awkward dynamic, I think. In particular, because it's 10 plus exactly, 3 monstrous infantry models like ogres, for example, don't count. So if you have a unit of 3 ogre bulls, their unit strength 9, they do not have enough strength to do literally anything anymore. So that's pretty cool. I like that a lot. Again, with the ogre bulls, they would have to have 3 models because they'd have to have the champion, standard musician left. If any of them died, they wouldn't have all 3, so they wouldn't score anymore.
And it did also result in at least 1,000% more musicians taken than we've ever seen in 2 years prior. Because otherwise, it was rare that someone ever took a musician. Because just the points, you're trying to maximize your list, and the base, what the musician does, breaking a tie or that, it's just people just don't see it as enough incentive to spend the
Well, the
points.
main
But
thing is
this
that people
was enough
forget
incentive
what
for
the
them to spend the
musician
points.
does at all, right?
That's
They
also
forget.
true. But
This
that's
pop
different.
quiz. What does the musician do? Tell us in the comments. I'll comment and reply to anyone who comments, and I'll tell you whether you got all of the things. Because the musician has like a laundry list of 4 things that he does, and it's easy to forget them.
Yeah.
Okay, the next one up is that normally Match Play Guide says only core units can score. That was a terrible idea. Let me tell you exactly what Games Workshop was thinking when they wrote that. They were thinking, we have so many people who email us writing comments saying, why do I have to take all these core units? They sit around and they don't do anything. I hate the core tax. I don't want a core tax. So they're like, okay, here's the solution. Core units are so critical to the scoring objectives that now they're the only ones who can do it. Bad idea. Here's why it's a bad idea. It's really asymmetrical from different factions who gets to be a core unit. And it's really annoying that some factions get to have way more access to really like modular core units than others, and that creates a way more feels bad situation for all the people who are left behind. Call out to all my Forces of Fantasy bros out there. But yeah, and so what are we doing instead? I think that any infantry and any cavalry unit can be a scoring unit when they're and they have to be have these unit strengths. So basically, like, you're not going to be a character and be scoring. You have to be.
Well, I think the interesting thing there, we've tried a few different versions of this. This is our next version we're trying of this with the community. We've tried versions where it was core plus infantry, right?
Kind.
That was another one that we tried. We've tried a few different versions of it. This latest version, the thought process here is, unfortunately, what we've seen with the over the months since players again have been working on the puzzle is a lot of we used to see more special or rare infantry taken in the past, or special or rare cavalry taken in the past. And soon as it was they couldn't score, we found that players just weren't taking them anymore, which is really disappointing. And such. And again, it doesn't matter whether that's a unit of Blood Knights or whether that's a unit of just special elite infantry that are special because they're not core. We just saw that. So
literally
we're
all
gonna
of
try
my
this.
favorite high elf units: Phoenix Guard, Swordmasters of Hoeth, White Lions of Crace, all of them. They don't exist. Dragon Princes, my 4th favorite unit.
Yeah. So we're gonna see what happens, and we'll let you all know to see how that goes. But we're thinking this might be really interesting, and we know even with the local group, like all of a sudden people are saying, oh, maybe I'll take Hex Wraiths, right?
Do it.
I haven't
Sounds
seen
great.
those in like a year and a half at the event. So, but that's great, right? And that's what we're really trying to accomplish. We're not trying to say this is the way you should play everything all the time going forward. We're saying, hey, for this event, maybe we could do some tweaks that maybe you'll take some units off the shelf and put them on the table, and both you and your opponent will have fun by seeing some fresh new things.
And also, just to keep in mind, this thing you're staring at right here is tailored for the missions that we're going to show you that are going to be at this event. So go ahead and try out this limitation with a friend or in a local community. You can just copy and paste this if you want. We have it for download on our Discord. You can go see it. But we also have missions here that I write. I iterate over the missions. I talk to people. We have polls after every event so we can get feedback.
Surveys. Yep.
Right. And I think that I've over 2 years learned quite a lot about exactly what makes a game really interesting and fun for people. So what's the next one?
Well, I'd say we learned a lot more. Oh, and by the way, if you're ever curious, you feel free to join our Discord. All of our event packs, all of our scenarios from past events, they're all public. So
Yeah.
they're all available. If you want to check them out, you want to play them yourself, you want to just download it and slap your name on it and change it. I don't care, whatever. Like, we are here to grow the community, right? So
Yeah.
everything's available for free. Feel free to use it. We're happy to help your community grow if we can.
Yeah, and we have our FAQ and our legacy changes and things are all under our OWL
All there.
downloads on the Discord. So the Discord's the great place to be.
Yep.
You also get to see me complain all the time and post pictures of my models. So you can do that. Okay, so the next one up, and I think after our last video, where maybe we got a little complainy, but it definitely is just from my experience of my 5 games over the past 2 events that I played in. And Mike totally agrees. Units in skirmish formation can't contest. So we added new units with the infantry cavalry restriction. It totally opens up the special and rare slot units to be allowed to score. For example, if you play knightly order and you bring pistoliers, those are a rare slot. But in this comp, as long as the pistoliers are in open order, they can score. And then the skirmishers, like your Empire archers, for example, can't anymore. So the skirmish formation not being able to score, I think, is a big part of what will make the game have a higher quality and more interaction, because the skirmishers being allowed to score were so good at it that it really led to only the warband units were being rank and file, bringing rank and file guys. So you had night goblins, you had gore bricks, and you had maybe some marauders. But any elite rank and file unit that didn't have warband, I don't think that they had much of a purpose at all.
Yep. So we'll see. So again, we don't want to harp on it because there's other things to talk about in this video. We're going to try it. We're going to see how it goes. We're going to test it out with 30 players at the team championship event, and we'll all let you know afterwards, after the survey, how it went and what people thought. It's not to say this is the way the game should be played going forward. This is the next thing we're going to try to keep it fresh, and we might not do it at all in the next event after that. So something to try.
Okay. And then the next one, the whole I sprinted across the table and now I'm touching the objective literally 0 inches away from it, and now I control it regardless of whether you have a bigger unit nearby, I felt was obnoxious. In particular, when that unit was a skirmisher who sprinted past you, your big brick of guys, and then they can't even charge that unit next turn. That was even more obnoxious. So what we decided to do for this one is that it's the highest combined unit strength of eligible units within range can control that objective. So if you have bigger, bulkier bricks that are in range, then you get to control it. So that's interesting. I think that could also mean that just bringing larger units or multiple units, and either one can be effective. I think that just having a single close unit tends to favor either I have a Death Star or I have just completely throwaway trash units who are 0 inches away, and they don't care whether you're right next to me with a big brick or not, right? So that's really interesting. We did something very similar to this with Gleaming Penance when I was doing that. It was based on rank bonuses instead of unit strength. But this is much similar to the match play guide. It's just not quite that whole abusable, whoever's closer wins type situation. Okay. So keeping all of that in mind, these are missions that we've been iterating over quite a bit. So I think these are perfectly tournament ready and battle ready. And I think that they fit the kind of meta that we're currently in. Now, the first thing you might notice is the deployment zones are a bit closer together than usual. And look, just like Mike says at every single event, you do not need to deploy your Dwarf Rangers on the line, okay, and then get charged right away.
Two things.
You don't have to.
I'd say 99% of players never remember or they don't even think about it. One, that's a deployment zone. You do not need to be on the front line. You can deploy on the back line. Just everyone just sees a zone. They're like, go to the front without even thinking about it. Two, I always tell people it's a 6-turn game. Everyone is playing the game like it ends on turn 2. So, well, not everybody, but a lot of people. It's just funny that I keep saying this time and time again, and I just keep seeing it again and again. But I love our community. It's a bunch of great people, and it's growing, and I love hanging out with them. But it is funny to see these repeated patterns. And also, the third one we see all the time is people caught up in the bloodlust. You just get excited. Oh, I'm going to take that unit out, and then your master plan all falls apart because you shouldn't have chased it or pursued it or attacked again. Everyone falls victim to those things.
Yeah, it's really funny. I'm sometimes victim to that. But yeah, so the first one, this is an adaptation based on the original, you control table quarters, there's 4 quarters. Well, the 4 quarters that you start in, generally speaking, one player deploys in 2 of them, and the other player deploys in the other 2. So in order to steal a quarter from somebody, it's pretty damn hard, and it's much easier to just sit in the back, hold the 2 quarters that you have, the other person gets the 2 quarters they have, and no interaction happens at all because We just started in one, so it's heavily kind of skewed towards you're going to control these two, I control those two, and it just kind of stays that way unless if you do quite a lot of damage or if you kind of rush, very far across the table. And then it also kind of punishes you for being a melee aggressive army because if you run across the table, now no one is standing in the backfield controlling the places you just left. So what is this instead? It's actually controlling it into 3 sectors or zones, and they are the left flank, the center, and the right flank instead. So they're each 24 inches wide and then 48 inches deep. And both players have deployments that start in all 3 zones. So when you're in the deployment phase, you can try to skew towards starting off with a strong control in 2 or 3, whichever sectors you can. And then the game becomes how do I how do I outscore them? Because there are 3 sectors to play for, not 4. So it's not an even number.
Yeah.
Now someone is going to get more than the other person.
You still want to go to their deployment zone for the bonus we have there. But I think the
Right.
interesting thing is the typical 4 table quarters. We found that led towards a lot of confusion, a lot of, oh, I can't get there, or I'm too slow, or a lot of, am I on the line or not on the line? We've actually found that the 3, slicing it in 3, actually we found a lot more enjoyable and successful for players. It's still fundamentally the same concept, but rather than the quad, just doing the 3 slices actually plays really well. I'd encourage you, if you haven't tried it, to try it at one of your local events.
I think one of the main reasons for that is that fantasy is just naturally not 40k, so there is no deep strike. Units that come in from ambush come in from the edge of a table edge, like so very far, and units do not go very fast for the most part. So there are no transports that fly a single squad of infantry like 20 inches on one turn or anything. So if you're going to try to get anywhere, you kind of have to either deploy there or be ready to slowly waddle across the table. And so having these sectors that people can start already in is great. The big tweak here is in blue. So if your scoring unit is at least partially in the enemy's deployment zone, that scoring unit counts as 2 units for the purposes of controlling it. So if you're kind of outnumbered, one great way to kind of solve that problem is you can ambush, you come in from behind, or you can outflank the enemy, and then you start counting as double, and then that can let you kind of, if you kind of still have that doubling effect later on, you can score even when the other person potentially has more scoring units than you. And this is also something that you can also win, during the game. If they bring a lot of cheap, chaff scoring units, you can just start cutting them down until you kind of outscore them by having fewer but sturdier bricks. And hopefully that is quite enjoyable. I have found it enjoyable. The scoring on this one is that at the end of every player's turn, you get 100 victory points for if you score the most sectors. So there's 5 rounds that you can score on, 2 turns per round, 100 victory points per each turn. If you were to score like literally all of them, that could be at the very most 1,000 victory points. Again, the average would be something like 500 or maybe 400. And then both players might get 5 or 400, and maybe you only end up getting 100 or 200 more than the other person. But again, it creates interactivity, and I think it's worth doing because if you totally ignore it, you give the other person 1,000 victory points.
Yeah, and that's, again, I don't want to go into it too long now, but we've learned many tests. The victory points have to be substantial for the objectives, or players will just ignore them.
Yeah, 25 points.
So again, you're like, wow, 1,000 points. I usually only play, they're only worth 300 points. We've done that many times. Players ignore them. They have to be, if I don't engage with this objective, if I just sit back and shoot, I will lose because I'm ignoring the objectives. They have to be that meaningful.
The easy math is that if you need to be willing to risk sacrificing a medium-sized unit to try to steal the objective from the opponent, because it's much safer to stay in the back, run away, flee, then rally, any of those options, because you save your kill points. But if the objective is costing you points at the same time, then you'll risk your units to try to steal them or to try to contest them, and that creates interactivity. Okay, the next one is Rally the Troops. I really love, and I've been a huge fan of the Breakpoint mission in the past that was always based on having banners, not just having more unit strength. The old world version being based on round unit strength, I don't understand. I don't get it, because if you're under 25% of your total unit strength left, how are you not just dead at that point? But banners, on the other hand, you can lose without the game being over necessarily, especially in a game dominated by characters. The banners are all being carried by your rank and file, right? So that's where Breakpoint came in. Now, Breakpoint Mike has always hated because it was a feel bad. It was, if you lose your such number of banners, then the enemy just gets 1 billion points. Cool. This is the inverse of that. You get victory points for still having standard bearers left alive at the end. So every standard bearer model that is alive and not fleeing and didn't get captured by the enemy is worth 150, worth up to 600 total. And every enemy every enemy standard captured also gets doubled, so it's worth 100 instead of 50 victory points in this scenario. So if someone is trying to bring a lot of banners just for this one scenario, because remember this is only scenario 2 out of 5, then they would also be extra vulnerable to losing those points in this mission, and they would be vulnerable to losing those points in all of the other missions in the other rounds. Yeah, so this one is, again, you don't always have to have an objective on the center of the table. This is units, and it's a kill, it's very much a kill focused game, but you get victory points for bringing what I like to see, which is a lot of banners. I'm actually hand painting a few of my archer banners right now.
Another thing we learned with the banner lesson is, again, if it's the same number of points you get for taking the opponent's banner versus keeping your own, players actually just don't take banners at all. It actually discourages them. So we actually have to flip it that we found that you need at least, it has to be meaningful, and it's double the number of points for taking banners and your opponent not getting them. Yes. So that's an interesting thing we've learned through a lot of trial and error.
Okay, so the mosh pit, this is fun. I did have an Andy Dwyer quote in here. So the mosh pit is a mission that's similar to King of the Hill, but we don't want to have to mess with our terrain layouts to say, okay, now everybody put a hill in the center or whatever. Hills are also not exactly the ideal place for everyone to go fight over because, your models are kind of tilting, they're slightly falling off and all that kind of thing.
And it blocks line of sight. It's actually the opposite of this is ideal for fighting.
Yeah, but the main one is that we use the same terrain layout on each individual table instead of what people sometimes do, which is that each mission has a dictated layout of terrain. So because of that, this is like King of the Hill, but the mosh pit is a 9-inch in radius circle, so 18-inch in diameter. And this is a big control area that is controlled by the most scoring units within that zone. If it's a tie, neither player controls it. So it's similar to like a Strategic Locations 1 or a King of the Hill. But again, on our missions, you can't score turn 1. It always kind of feels bad if the player who gets to go first, which already has a 57% win rate on average just by going first, also gets to just score 200 points where the other person had no way to interact whatsoever, right? Because they just go in the middle and grab a bunch of victory points for free. Then they're also, kind of fighting down because the next person has to try to dislodge them. But instead, you start on round 2, you get 100 victory points for each round that you can hold it. So that's I did some math down here because people continuously kept asking me, so wait, is it every turn or every round? And I think the fact that sometimes we call rounds turns is what confuses people. So I did the math here with 5 scoring rounds, 2 turns per round, 100 victory points, multiplies out into 1,000 at most.
Well, also gets people confused on, is it my turn, both players' turns, or just the round? The combined only happens once versus is it first turn versus second. It is confusing. So we try to standardize that as much as possible. Every mission is none of the scoring objectives work until round 2, right? And so we just try to find ways to keep it more standard, not because that's more fun, but we found it's already complicated enough to master your own army and then master your opponent's army to play a complex game of the old world and to be taking into account scoring and win conditions and any other special rules. So we found one scoring condition, one special rule is about the capacity. And even then, people will forget the special rule of the mission. So we really try and ideally, if you can combine your one special rule with the scoring objective, so they're very closely tied to each other, the success rate of people remembering that and playing it and having fun with it goes way up.
Yeah, so we had some learning pains from trying to have it be that, okay, infantry get to have this buff in this mission, but then the scoring units get to be, they don't have to be infantry to be scoring, and people are just getting all confused, and they thought only infantry gets to score, that kind of thing. So we just super streamlined it. It doesn't have to do with that. Okay, so then on the 4th one, we like baggage trains, but unlike everyone else in the world, we don't like when you have a baggage train mixed in with other objectives because it's way too complicated for most players. They will just forget their baggage train exists or forget to go for the other one. And then it's very difficult to work on 2 things at once. But having a scenario where there's only one baggage train exposed to care about is also not a lot. And that's why we have this one where each player deploys 2 baggage trains in their deployment zone. They have to be 12 inches away from each other, and that's the objective. Now, normally on like a 24-inch away deployment, it's really hard to ever even get there if you don't have skirmishers or scouts or ambushers to go over there and go and grab the baggage train. that's challenging. So this is the mission where we're doing the diagonal deployment that gives you that ability to be a little bit closer, especially an ability to kind of outflank the enemy. And this puts a lot of pressure on you to try to hold on to that baggage train and gives you some variety. I know that people are going to get bored if every single deployment is 15 from the back and that's it. And that's, so this is a variant for the deployment on purpose to match this specific objective. And then the one special rule we added in on this time is that, hey, that's ours. So you get hatred versus any enemy unit that's within 6 inches of your baggage train, or that has already destroyed a baggage train in the game. So you get to have revenge against people who go and smash your stuff, which I think is great. I think that should have just been in match play. I think that'd be great.
Yeah, so that's one of our newer ones. We're going to try that and see how it works out.
Okay, so then the last one is flank attack. This is kind of the most strategic locations 3 of any of them, but they're not just straight down the middle. I kind of like this triangular deployment. It does kind of evoke that like flanking mission going around the sides type idea, because you can't deploy over there. So unless if you have any scouts or ambushers, this is kind of a free area, free place to go. And that's the most contentious place to go, because that's kind of the central objective to take. But you have to do that while still holding on to the one that's closer to you. So this gives you a lot to fight over. But if you see from the measurements, they're 15 inches away. So that means that once they go in 15 from one side, 15 from another, these two objectives are only 18 inches apart. And the deployment zones are only 18 inches apart here. So that gives you quite an easy way, even if you're infantry, to get across the table, get into combat, get to the enemy objective, and have a fun game, I think. Okay, so that's the missions we're playing at this event. I think that anyone out there can play any of these. If you have the screenshots, or if you want to just get our downloads from Discord, that would be awesome. I really think that this is a much healthier meta out there. I've seen some horrifying lists. I was looking at the Six Nations tournament, where in England they play much more close to what the Games Workshop or the WTC rules are, and I found a lot of those armies not fun to play against. I wouldn't want to play them. So. Okay.
Cool. All right, so that's it. So we got to the end of this video. So again, hopefully we gave you some ideas or some inspiration for things you could try at your local scene. And again, the main thing is we very much encourage everybody to try different formats, to try different tweaks. We're not huge fans personally of doing huge comp restrictions. Instead, we'd like to rotate throughout.
Yeah.
And that's fine if people want to do that. You know what? If your local community loves that, then great. As long as everybody's having fun, that's awesome. But we found a lot of success of really, keeping it fresh, rotating different things, different formats, different events, different rules throughout the year, and have had a lot of success with that. And we encourage people to try new things, because one of the things I love about the system of Old World is it's such an open system. It's great for playing the game in a lot of different ways. It supports it really well.
Yeah, and in the meanwhile, when we don't get official releases from Games Workshop, when we don't have new models or factions or rules changes, I mean, FAQ 152 was I'm trying to remember anything that happened other than Cathay, and I can't at the moment.
It's light.
So because of that, it's like, look, this is a great time to try some new stuff on our side. And if Match Play Guide 2.0 comes out a month later, great. We'll probably be playing that for a year, but I doubt it.
Yeah.
I think that it's likely that the 40K release has delayed the Old World's releases in general, because I've been there. There's a limited number of factories in Nottingham that can print this stuff, and as much as it might potentially help if they ever said, hey, by the way, we're moving all the manufacturing to China, they haven't done that. Okay, they make it in England and then they ship it to the US or to wherever you are. That takes a while, and there's not enough factories to make Old World and 40K and AOS with high quality, I think.
All right. Well, everybody stay legendary, and we will see you next time.